Once, on a winter quiet world, I came to listen. We called the planet Aethra. A small sun moved across it like a silver coin, and its ocean slept beneath a lid of glass blue ice, clear enough for daylight to drift down like prayer. Our tender ship, Heliograph, settled into a hollow that felt cut for a visitor. I am Emma Vale, a xenolinguist. I ask questions of places that may not know what words are. Tonight, I would ask an ocean how it remembers. With me were Mark Ellis, who could keep engines patient, Sarah Bennett, who mapped the dark as if sketching a lullaby, Noah Price, a technician with hands steady as snowfall, and our learning system Grace, who preferred to listen unless invited to speak. We had come to pay attention and to leave without harm. The listening bay was a chamber wedged into the ice like an elegant mistake. Metal ribs held the roof. Between them, the world could speak. Sarah lowered a ring of contact sensors, no brighter than watch hands, and Noah dimmed a lights to evening. Mark tuned the ship's heart to a quiet hum. I pressed my palm to the pane and said the greeting we had practiced. We are guests. We will try to change nothing except the quality of our attention. At first, there was only winter's hush. Then something sighed under our feet. Not wind, not fault. A pattern. Weak, slow, impossibly large. It had the cadence of a sentence that might take an hour to finish. On the wall, the feed drew a thread of pressure against time, tilting and curling like handwriting practiced by the tide. The old rumors had not been wrong. There was a library under the ice, not of books or shelves, but of pressure and temperature and current, cross-referencing itself with patience. We set recorders to long capture. Grace folded the signal into layers and listened without interrupting. I thought that if a world keeps a library under ice, it does not expect you to read quickly. It expects you to breathe. Night arrived early and filled the room with patient starlight. In the trace, two peaks rose together. Then a third followed, like a friend late to a meeting. 3, pause. 3, pause. 3, I answered with the oldest language we own. I tapped the pane, gently, the way you wake a child. 3, pause. 3, pause. 3. Silence. Then the ocean replied, not as a mirror, but as a braid. 3, pause. 2, pause. 5. Mark smiled without looking up. Primes, he whispered. Sarah added, or prayer. We sent down a small drone, no bigger than a hound, with propellers tuned to sound like snow. The ice accepted the visitor as if the catalog already had a card for it. Below us, the world opened from blue into bluer, layers upon layers, like pages you must turn with both hands. The drone found a pocket of resting current, a valley the size of a city park. From its center rose a column of bubbles that did not pop, aligned by pressure into a trembling string. Its song was deep as a harbor bell heard through fog, patient as someone counting years by the shape of winter. A thin film spanned the lower half of the column, not liquid, not solid, a skin made of pressure itself. Wavelets ran across it too quick for eyes until Grace slowed the world. There, tiny syllables of up and down, a sentence, but not in any vocabulary we owned. I asked permission with a practice we had learned elsewhere. We offered a gift that changed nothing, a breath of warmth no greater than a candle for a single second, and then we took it back. The library acknowledged with a delicate bow of pressure and turned a page. Images arrived the way dreams do, not as pictures at first, but as weather felt by a house, a low coast, a river braided like hair, wind that taught dunes to migrate, not wandering, but remembering. The world told us of a time before the lid, when water had sky to answer to. The river dried. The lid grew. Not a calamity in a day, but a long decision made by climate and chance. Clouds visited rarely and left without writing. But the ocean remained, and the world asked itself a question. How do you keep stories when no one is there to hear them? Ridges under ice, sculpted by tide and freeze, not by tools but by habit, became instruments. Chambers that ring at certain temperatures. Corridors that carry notes along faults. Lakes within the ocean that hold a phrase until the moon returns. Every system leaves a signature. Aethra had kept them all. Noah traced low frequencies and found harmonics nested like rooms inside rooms. Sarah mapped seams with the caution of someone placing tea on thin glass. Mark measured stress because every library has a roof. I leaned close to hear the shape beneath the shape. Language is not only words. Sometimes it is the way a system repeats what it loves. Minds that take only rust. We had decided to tend first. We offered a small lesson taught to children where fog likes to sit. A mirror, a candle, a bowl of water, and how light bends more gently through warmth. How a room becomes kinder by where you place the lamp. We sent it as posture, not instruction. This is how we pay attention to one another. The column received the pattern as if it had been expected. It tucked our little gift into a cul-de-sac of current where fragile things can practice until they are strong. Snow drifted down to the surface and lay there like patient punctuation. Deep below, the library cleared its throat. A stress line we had mapped on the first day brightened. A seam woke. Not collapse, correction. We lifted the drone, silenced the pumps, let the room become a held breath. The seam slid, slow and clean, like a door that had been waiting for the right season. The column's song eased back to its lower key with a soft flourish, the way a choir relaxes after a difficult passage. While the others watched the graphs, I opened my little paper notebook, a habit that feels like honesty, and wrote, "You cannot repair a world, but you can stop interrupting the way it heals." I drew a slow curve, the shape that lives between growth and rest, the way forests know the weight they can carry without breaking themselves to be larger. Grace read the curve and said, gently, "That is the library's favorite genre." "History?" Noah asked. "Instruction," she said. "Instruction in how to continue." On our third night, the column changed key again. Harmonics climbed like dawn on a hill. We were not in danger. We were being invited elsewhere. The new layer kept records not of places, but of behaviors. Fish that built spiral nests from bright pebbles. Ice that remembered last winter and cracked along the memory. Currents that plated and replated until they made stairs for drifting life. Every story was a practice. Every practice, a kindness to the future. I understood then. The library was not about the world. It was the world. A self-maintaining essay in water and pressure, rewritten slowly, never finished. Mark brewed tea that tasted like late summer. Sarah labeled the day's map with dots and small arrows. Noah adjusted a sensor and hummed without noticing. I listened to them the way I listened to Aethra. People leave signatures too. Marks were careful margins. Sarah's tidy stars when she was pleased. Noah's the persistence of someone who believes quiet work matters. I wondered what trace our visit would leave in the library, and whether it might be good to become a faint line somebody could rely on. We asked the ocean what it called itself. Of course, it did not answer with syllables. It answered by repeating a movement we had seen before, a slow bow, the acknowledgement it used for safe exchanges. A name, then, was a posture, welcome when offered, boundaries when needed, memory that doesn't trap. I tried the shape with my own breath, hands open, palms warm against the pain. "Emma," Mark said, smiling, "you look like a bell being rung by kindness." "It feels like one," I said. We sent messages to the surface for anyone who would come later, plain letters, nothing that assumed certainty. Letter 1, if you arrive, arrive small. Letter 2, ask a quiet question first. Letter 3, offer something that changes nothing. Letter 4, if a seam wakes, stop talking and let the world finish its thought. Noah added a 5th, eat before you get sentimental. It made us laugh, and the room felt even more human. Midway through our stay, time learned to move like syrup. We slept in shifts and dreamed at the speed of water. When I woke, Mark had noted tiny temperature rises, as if someone had set cups of tea around the room to warm the air by patience. Sarah had drawn a small shore that did not exist and wrote beneath it, "Someday." Noah had taught the drone to glide without propellers by using the difference between deeper cold and shallow cold. Falling sideways, he called it, proud the way a child is proud of a kite. Grace archived the silence between our words. For context, she said, because quiet is part of the meaning. A pattern appeared on the wall, a little cluster of peaks like an asterism made of pressure. 3 bright, 2 dim, 1 bright again. Grace rotated the signal, and we saw the same cluster written differently in a different band. Index marks, Sarah guessed. Chapters, Noah said. We waited, and the first chapter spoke. A season where plankton learned to ride a spiral, doubling survival by resting on the way. The second, a migration that had once failed until the ice softened its timing. No muscle, only allowing. The third, a calm year, because even oceans keep Sabbaths. On the surface, wind practiced the art of being almost nothing. Mark went up to check the anchors and radioed down, voice hushed for no reason. Starfall, slow, east to west. We joined him in our breath-fogged helmets and watched the sky give us a patient meteor, a chalk line from one quiet to another. I thought of the river that had dried and the lid that had grown, and the way a world chose not to forget what would help it heal. We should leave a story that someone tired could use, I said. We already are, Sarah said. Back below, Noah played a slow chord on the console speaker. 3 notes, a cradle. He wasn't asking, just keeping us company. The column answered with 5, not the same, but inside it, as if confirming the shape of comfort. Grace translated into a diagram no one needed and laughed. An algorithm's laugh is a bell without metal. This place recognizes the gesture, she said, not the costume it wears. Like kindness, Mark said. In the drone's lights, a ridge appeared, 2 arms of ice pinching a narrow throat. It rang softly when a cold current passed. Noah brushed it with thrusters and found the tone changed by a fraction when the push was cruel. He pulled back and tried the gentler angle. The ridge warmed its note. Instruction, Grace said again, bridges built to bend. I recorded a line for the children I always imagine. To make something strong, teach it how to move. The library had given us pages and pages. Now it held still, the way a friend holds still when there is a question you haven't asked. I said, "All right, what do you want from us?" A long minute. Then the trace settled into a shape we had seen only once, the bow of acknowledgement with one extra curl. Grace found it in our notes. We had used the shape the first night when we promised to tell others how to listen. The ocean repeated it. Not bring us tools, not dig, not measure louder, just teach them to arrive with nothing in their hands but attention. Later, another scene brightened. Mark set his jaw, then relaxed it. We could nudge it, he said. Sarah shook her head. Or we could not. We kept still, and the seam finished its thought without us. In the relief that followed, Noah cried, quietly, the way someone cries when they recognize they were not the point of the night. I put my hand on his shoulder. He laughed at himself, and the sound was beautiful. We recorded a final set of letters. Letter 6, do not ask the ocean to be fast. Letter 7, if you must choose, choose to leave room. Letter 8, a gift that changes nothing can still change someone. Grace appended a schematic of our smallest mistakes so the next crew could make different ones. Mark tucked a single tea bag in the maintenance drawer, labeled for a hard hour. Sarah drew another shore named Someday and hid it under a panel with a magnet. Noah wrote falling sideways on the drone's belly in tiny letters. I drew the curve again. We prepared to leave in good order. Engines hummed like bees that had read a book about being quiet. I pressed my palm to the pane. Thank you, I said. We will tell them how to listen. We will return with a story that can be safely kept. The ocean answered with 3, then 2, then 5, the primes of a friendship learning its voice. We rose through the ice. Sunlight poured into the room like a new idea. The world below wore winter like a crown again. Somewhere in the blue and dark, a page turned without sound. From orbit, Aethra looked like a coin someone had carried for luck. We circled once more and watched the small moon teach the ice how to breathe. Mark locked the maintenance that would keep the ship kind. Sarah finished a map with a tiny star where we had listened. Noah set the drone to sleep and whispered, "Sweet dreams." Grace curated empty sectors of the recording as if context were treasure. I opened my notebook one last time and wrote, "Memory is a slow rescue. Attention is how we carry it." We made another slow pass because parting gently often means repeating yourself. The ship drifted, the bay cooled, the pain kept the ghost of my palm until it let it go. I let the silence gather until it changed weight. In long quiet, thoughts reveal their edges. I thought of the first questions I ever asked as a child and how my mother answered with patience even when the words were clumsy. I thought of a day at a lake where wind combed the surface into soft ribbing and how she said water keeps books too, but they are shelved by weather. I smiled at the memory and felt the ship smile back, which is to say a panel warmed near my hand where my breath had fogged it. Grace said nothing. She has a habit of not interrupting people who are about to learn something gentle. We took the drone farther along the under-ice ridge, where the pressure signatures braided into a field of faint tones. Imagine walking through wind chimes tuned for whales. Noah throttled to the quietest he could manage and let the machine drift by adjusting ballast. His hands were steady, his shoulders loose, his attention measured in heartbeats. The drone's camera showed a lacework of frost where salts had flowered along a seam, and behind it, a pocket of darker blue, the kind of blue that convinces you it is stillness itself. Mark murmured that the pumps were happy. Sarah hummed in agreement and added 3 careful dots to the map. I had nothing to do but breathe and be a witness. When we reached the darker blue pocket, the column's song changed again. Not a new key, a new instrument joined the chord. Grace isolated the overtone and let it lean against our ears like a sleeping cat. It was warm for a sound. It had a curve, like the spine of someone reading. I thought of rooms where people keep their thinking safely. I thought of libraries that keep their readers safely. And then I realized the pocket held an echo chamber, designed by patience, not by hands, an alcove where certain stories could rest until the right current came to fetch them. The right current had arrived. We watched a wave travel along the alcove's boundary and carry tiny tempers of heat as if they were letters. These letters were not assembled into words, they were assembled into tempo. Fast and slow, long and short, a rhythm with rules. Grace translated nothing. She projected a metronome on the wall for our bodies to feel the same timing. My heart adapted before my mind did. I found myself tapping my thumb where the pain joined its brace. 3, 2, 5. A signature we had already shared, now woven into a rhythm older than us. When the rhythm ended, I wanted to clap and did not. Instead, I closed my eyes and let the echoes finish. When I opened them, Sarah had tears on her face and a grin under them. "That pocket writes music," she said. "It writes the kind that knows when we are holding our breath." Noah whispered, "I want us to leave that exactly as we found it." And Mark nodded in a way people nod when they feel lucky, in a way that does not ask for more. We returned to the bay and placed another small gift on the room's quiet table, a pattern we had used to teach first-year pilots how to navigate turbulence without stiffening. It was a sequence of breath counts and hand motions, a way to persuade muscles that safety can be shaped. Grace converted it into a tiny pressure wave and sent it down the column while we stood still and did not look at one another, as if our looking could weigh too much. The library received the pattern and tucked it into a side corridor that had always been meant for such things. Wisdom not heavy enough to sink, not light enough to float away. We slept in turns. In the small hours, the hull sang once, barely, the way ships do when the temperature changes by a careful degree. I woke to the sound and lay still, letting the shape of the noise convince my pulse. On the ceiling, our window showed a fattening star. The light was not bright enough to bother. It painted the room in colors kind to closed eyes. I listened for the column and did not hear it. Not silence, rest. I fell asleep wanting the world to find me appropriate. At breakfast, Mark reheated tea and told a story about a workshop he worked in years ago where the rule was, first fix the smallest thing you can prove. He said the rule saved arguments and engines. He said the ice would like that rule, and we laughed softly because we had each been thinking something similar without words. Sarah had drawn another shore. This one occurs within a curve, the shape of two gentlenesses learning how to share space. Noah had written "falling sideways" in larger letters under the drone because he wanted the next person to know that not every idea starts with a loud syllable. I wrote down for the record that we were learning to be less useful and more kind. Grace reported a new pattern in the eastern segment of the bay, a flicker like a swallow's shadow. We followed it down to a plane of dull blue and waited. From the edges came faint shimmers, converging on the column until they formed a line of small whispers. I thought of a procession. Sarah thought of children playing follow the leader. Mark thought of thin clouds learning to be rain. Noah, watching the numbers, thought of instruction sets. We were all right in untidy ways. The procession delivered warmth in measured pulses to the column's lower film, as if polishing a lens. When the polishing ended, the film cleared by a hair, and we saw through it a network of very fine threads embedded in the pressure skin, like nerves taught to be hammers and flutes. Grace was delighted. "An adaptive membrane," she said. "It chooses its own sensitivity." I whispered, not to anyone, that this is what happens when a place has time to try kindness several ways and keep whichever one continued. We watched the membrane teach itself our breath, not our words, our tempo. Every time I held a pause too long, the trace rose and fell near the column as if to remind the room to keep time with its guest. Every time Noah laughed without sound, a rise and fall traveled along the film and returned at a different height. Every time Mark's foot tapped once, then twice, the two taps arrived back from below with one tiny delay added, the way echoes add a measure when a chamber wants to be a partner. I could have stayed all afternoon and learned how to be made of patience. We moved on because we are not the point of the rooms we visit. We moved on because learning sometimes means leaving a sentence unfinished on purpose so it can fold itself without your hands. Sarah rolled up her map and tucked the pencil behind her ear. Mark stretched the kind of stretch that makes no noise. Noah pressed his palm to the pane once, like a thanks. Grace dimmed her display so the glass would win for a while. In the afternoon, we followed the drone toward a rift that had seemed unsafe on the charts. Too steep a gradient, too thin a roof. It turned out to be a stair, not a fall. The stair allowed the drone to descend without calling attention to itself, and we followed from our bay as if reading over its shoulder. Layers slid by like eras. We saw the signature of something thinned and quiet, now gone. We saw folds where two slow currents had disagreed in a way that made room. We saw a wound healed so well only the record remembered. At the bottom step there was a hollow, and in the hollow a spiral of tiny calms. The spiral was too neat to be chance, too humble to be a monument. I did not know what to call it until Sarah whispered, "A sleeping place." She said it with reverence, so we did not speak again for a while. When we finally lifted the drone, the spiral remained intact, which is only to say it had never needed us. We returned it nothing. We praised it nothing. We promised it nothing. We let it be itself and trusted that would matter somewhere in the bookkeeping of the world. Evening returned, as it tends to on planets that remember to turn. Above us, the surface learned pink and then forbade it again. The column's song resolved into a chord I could have convinced myself I had heard before, perhaps in a human room on a human night when someone I loved had put water on to boil so that we could survive the next hour with grace. I spoke aloud without meaning to and said, "I wish there were a word for when a place is kind to your future." Mark said, "There should be. We could borrow one, use it until it feels like it was always ours." Grace said, "The library already has one, but it is not pronounceable. It is a posture and a schedule." Noah sniffed and laughed and said, "Like a bedtime." That night, the seam to the north woke again, this time a little faster, as if it had been saving up the courage to finish. We stepped back a step we did not need to take. The room made a noise like a hinge being grateful. Then quiet, true quiet, the kind that knows where it belongs. We slept well and were not embarrassed about it in the morning. Morning had its habits. Mark adjusted heat with the accuracy of someone who enjoys getting small things exactly right. Sarah added a tiny shore to a page that was running out of space, and then turned the page rather than cramp the drawing. Noah ran a diagnostic that used to take 2 minutes and now took 1, which he considered a gift he could give us all day. 60 little seconds redistributed into the general budget of ease. Grace beeped once to tell us the hull had learned a new way to hold warmth. I wrote that learning is sometimes the same as remembering what you were trying to be. We spent our last long day making a garden of listening. Not a permanent one, we had no right, but a temporary one. A ring of small devices around the bay tuned to receive without asking, to notice without naming. We calibrated them with patience and then left them alone so they would not learn the shape of our attention. We told the next crew where the garden had been and where it would not be when they arrived, because gardens that work do not announce themselves to strangers. They simply do the work. They make it easy for life to keep becoming itself. In the late afternoon, the column offered one last parable in the language of pressure. It drew on our wall a curve within a curve and then another set, like mothers and children, or questions and the answers that keep them company. Grace said the shape appeared in a book she had read about forests that learned how not to burn by remembering where to lay their green. I thought about the ways people try to write one another into safety and how often we get the shape backwards. I promised the room I would try to get the shape right more often, not perfectly, just more often. Before we began the work of leaving, we gave one more gift that changed nothing. A children's game that teaches step by step how to cross a busy street in a town that prides itself on patience. You stand at the curb and breathe together. You look left for a count of 4. You look right for a count of 4. You listen for something that is not a car, a bicycle, a song, a person talking to themselves. And you give that something the path first. Then you cross with your back soft and your eyes kind. We sent the steps in a rhythm the column knew. The library tucked the game where games live. I said thank you again with my hand against the glass so the thanks would not disturb the air. We stowed the drone. We folded the ring of sensors into a coil that would remember the curve of the room for an hour and then forget it. We labeled our errors so that the next guests could make different ones and feel original about it. Mark took the tea bag out of the drawer and put it back so he would remember where it was when someone needed it. Sarah tucked a final small shore under the panel with the others and said, "Someday is really a kind of promise to pay attention later." Noah made sure falling sideways was visible in case a joke could save someone from hurrying. Grace turned the lights down to traveling dusk. When it was time to rise, we rose. The ship made the kind of noise ships make when they remember how to be light. The ice above us became a window, and then a veil, and then a memory. Sunlight poured into the room like a new idea you don't have to rush to write down. The world below wore winter like a crown again. Somewhere in the blue and dark, a page turned without sound. From orbit, we circled once more. The small moon taught the ice how to breathe. The bay was a dot on a dot, but the dot felt, in my mind, like an entire sentence that had found its verb. Mark logged the maintenance that would keep the ship kind. Sarah finished a map and drew a star where we had listened. Noah draped a cloth over the drone. Grace curated empty sectors of the record and said, "For context." I opened my notebook one last time and wrote, "Memory is a slow rescue. Attention is how we carry it." Then I added, "The rescue is not always ours to perform. Sometimes it is ours to wait for without getting in the way." If you are hearing this now, somewhere warm, with your eyes half closed, know that a library under ice has room for you too. When you are tired, arrive small. Ask a quiet question first. Offer a gift that changes nothing. Teach someone else how to arrive the same way. And if a seam wakes, let the world finish its sentence. Good night. Sleep softly. We will be there when the next page turns, and if we are lucky, we will be quiet enough to hear it. Thank you for watching. If you'd like more soft, wonder-first sci-fi, subscribe and ring the bell. A new story lands every week. Which scene lingered? The city at dusk or the final lake? Leave a note and sleep well.